As of about 8:53 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the last part of the convoy of the 4th Stryker Brigade, 440 troops, and seemingly nearly as many vehicles, the exact number was 68 armored Stryker vehicles, had passed through the Kuwait-Iraq border and were out of Iraq, symbolizing, and we emphasize the symbol part of that word, the last combat troops from the United States of America leaving Iraq, leaving 50,000. That's the released number, 50,000 troops to serve as advisors and trainers. Although the date of this was scheduled for the end of this month, the military did it a little early. The 18-month timetable drawdown announced in February of 2009 by President Obama was met with time to spare. Officially, this Operation Iraqi Freedom, three of the most unfortunate words in American history, perhaps, will continue till the 1st of September. But for all intents and purposes, this part is as closed as the gate behind that last vehicle is closed as of this hour. We'll be getting back out both to Rachel Maddow, who is in the international zone, the former green zone in Baghdad, and our own Richard Engel, who, along with cameraman Craig White, is, in fact, part of that now departed from Iraq convoy for the 4th Stryker Brigade. In the interim, I want to talk with my colleague Lawrence O'Donnell about some things that nothing is coincidence in terms of the public relations handling of the war. The statement that was issued today was from the State Department. The spokesman who appeared was from the State Department. The Pentagon has not spoken about this. The White House has not spoken about this. This is the State Department's part of this war. If we're up for debate, this was a Defense Department administration war when it began. It is now firmly, if it has not already done this, it is now firmly and officially changed hands.
It has, and this was actually the original intent, was that the State Department was going to run a massive rebuilding operation. Donald Rumsfeld, in effect, seized control of that into the Defense Department before we actually invaded Iraq. But the State Department doing what it's about to do was in the original early war plans and reconstruction plans. The State Department has never really been tested on an exercise this big, this difficult, and in such a live-fire possible situation. One of the things the State Department is going to do, to begin with, is bring in about 7,000 private security force personnel. Now, you know, we're watching the removal of 440 troops tonight as the final removal of combat troops. We've seen this in the past when we try to look at what is the real force level in Iraq. You know, who do we count? Should we have counted Blackwater when Blackwater was there? A lot of people think we should have. So we're going to, now, this group that's going in now is going to be under much tighter control than Blackwater was. They're all very mindful of the scandals that Blackwater left behind in Iraq. They are not going to have unlimited powers. They are going to be subject to the Iraqi government's control and laws. And so we can expect, I think, reasonably a different standard of behavior there. But these are going to be guys with guns in Iraq, Americans, and we're not going to count them as being in our 50,000 troop level. And so I think we're going to have to continue to hold on to a lot of the analytical tools we've been using to stare at Iraq over the years and figure out exactly what is going on there.
If at the maximum point, there are 248,000 U.S. troops involved in this, and 45,000 British, and 2,000 Australian, and 194 Polish. If that was the original number, why is a count of 50,000 better than a count of 60,000? If you count the contractors.
Well, there's some, you know, there's some strong parallels involved. As I mentioned earlier in the first hour of our coverage, 50,000 is what we have in Germany. Yep. At this distance from World War II, 50,000 can be made to sound like a perfectly reasonable number. And depending on how they're being used at this stage of this history, it may well be a perfectly reasonable number, especially when we consider that, unlike Germany, there's a departure date for the 50,000 that is reasonably close in time. And so, we're going to be looking at very closely exactly what they're doing. A lot of people just want to say it's training. A lot of people want to say it's office work. Surely there will be a great deal of that, but they are going on patrols. Jack Jacobs, when he was talking about earlier tonight, when he went to Vietnam
as an advisor after
the war was over, he was in combat every day.
Yes,
because he was an advisor, and that's what the advice is. You're standing there beside people in combat, saying, "Here's how we do it."
That's right. Shoot. My advice to you is to shoot, or my advice to you is to run.
Exactly.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the politics of that, and the politics of this night, and how it applies to the bigger picture politics of the next couple of months ahead. For that, we're rejoined by Howard Fineman of Newsweek and MSNBC. And what is this, and how does this play into it, and how is the White House being kind of a step removed from this extraordinary visual tonight? Why would they do it that way, and what's the overall impact in your estimation at this point, looking ahead to the midterms?
Well, I think that's extraordinary, Keith, and a very, very good point. This is happening not like it happened at the beginning with the daisy cutters and the big explosions. It's happening quietly in a way. We're covering it in a sensational fashion, beautifully. But when Barack Obama gave a speech down in Florida a couple hours ago, he didn't mention the region at all. He talked only about the economy. In a strange way, these are both wars, the war in Iraq and the ones now still going on in Afghanistan, that the American people would rather forget about for the most part. They've concluded that the war in Iraq was a success, according to the polls, but I think that's almost a kind of willing suspension of disbelief. They just want to get it behind us as a nation. In the case of Afghanistan, the polls say it's very unpopular. As a war, the American people don't see the connection between these two wars and being safer as a people here at all. They know trillions have been spent. They know that thousands of lives have been lost. They've lost patience with it. And on the campaign trail, interestingly, these are not the dominant issues. It's the economy. It's unemployment. It's even the environment, all of which rank ahead of Afghanistan, which is still an unpopular war. Barack Obama gets credit for keeping his deadline, but it's not going to resonate in the fall elections.
Yeah, and I include us in this equation. I'm not trying to say, well, everybody else ignored this. But for a practical matter, after the election of November 2008, Iraq stopped being a front-burner issue at almost all times. And there were exceptions, of course. But that happened, and it's not entirely the media's fault that something like that happens. It is also a function of government and the will of a people, is it not?
Yeah, I think it's a function also of the American people. We have a tiered system here, Keith, in which we have largely professional soldiers, supplemented, as Jack said, by the National Guard and the reserves. But this war has been fought by a small segment of the American society. The rest of the American society has taken on a burden of debt and guilt, if you will, as we've continued to live our lives. And now most of the American people want to move on from Iraq and indeed from Afghanistan. And Barack Obama, who might otherwise in other circumstances prefer to be talking about this on a night like this, doesn't want to, number one, because then he'll have to talk about Afghanistan, which is very unpopular, and because he knows that politically in the United States we're focused on the dire state of the economy, which, by the way, is not unrelated to the $2 or $3 trillion that we've spent in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're a rich country, but it's not a bottomless pit.
Right. A debt is a debt. It doesn't matter what the origin of it is, and so much of it originated from these 2 points. Howard, thank you for that. Let me look ahead also with Gene Robinson of the Washington Post and MSNBC. And Gene, the Iraq that those 440 troops symbolizing the end of the combat operation tonight are leaving looks like what, and our relationship to it is what, and where do we go from here? Or did we symbolically check out tonight the way those troops literally left the country?
To answer all those questions, I can say, what?
Yeah.
You know, all wars have unintended consequences. The Iraq that we invaded, ruled by the terrible, awful, brutal despot Saddam Hussein, was a counterpoint to Iran in this continual battle for domination of the Persian Gulf region. The Iraq we leave behind, our combat troops leave behind tonight, is in no way able to serve as a counterpoint to Iran. And in fact, one of the biggest unintended consequences of this war has been the vast strengthening of Iran's position as a regional power. And as a result of that, and that alone, we haven't heard the last of this conflict. We haven't seen the last of its ramifications, and they could prove to be more momentous than we can really even imagine right now.
And it has been momentous from the beginning, so to think of it as more momentous is a terrifying prospect. My thanks to Gene Robinson, to Lawrence O'Donnell, and to Howard Feynman for our last conversation.